Just joining us now. People are just joining us now. If you've just joined us, and our webinar looking at what's happening in accounts payable as far as the move to automation is about to start. And if you'd like to reach out and introduce yourself in the chat, please do, and we can see where you are now just before we get started. So welcome to this webinar. Automation's happening more slowly in some places than in others, but it's here to stay. And we've just completed the latest global survey and report into automation trends. The survey was conducted by IFOL and it was sponsored by SAP Concur. And there have been some changes in the past 12 months. As usual, there'll be a guide available following the session, so no need to make notes. Please put any questions you have in the chat and we'll pick them up as soon as we can. I'm Sue Beersmore, and I'm joined by two at the moment, but one hoping to join us in a minute, of our experts, all with considerable experience in the field, and they'll be reviewing the results of the survey and discussing why and how of automation in AP. Rod Chadwick's an accountant by training, holding senior roles for 25 years and a former head of process improvement at the Royal Mail in the UK, now continuous improvement lead with Delinean. Bobby Hodges is Senior Product and Solution Manager with SAP Concur, an American software services company. Bobby is a cloud technology and hyperscale expert and works with clients to find solutions and speed up processes to increase productivity in companies from small startups to established brands. And we hope in a little while to be joined by Blanca McGrory, who has a lot of accounting experience with management roles in a wide range of industries and is currently the manager for accounts payable in the city of Vancouver, which I think she's dealing with at the moment. So welcome to everyone. Now, first of all, I think we're going to ask you to take part in a poll that is coming up shortly, and we'll see if that appears. And I'll ask you all to, how would you describe the current state of AP automation in your company? You've only got one choice. We just want to see what's going on out there in our audience at the moment. So none, no AP automation, partially automated, whatever that means to you, mostly automated, or fully automated. And you can have a moment or two to look at those options and see how that works for you. So how would you describe the current state of automation in your company? Just one choice: none, partially automated, mostly automated, or fully automated. And I hope that we'll be able to see the results right. 53% partially automated, no automation in 20%, mostly automated 20%, and some right ahead there, fully automated 7%. So that gives us something to talk about, as well as the results of the survey that we've already carried out. So first of all, let's ask Rod and Bobby, how did that appear to you? That looks about, I think, what the survey was showing, doesn't it? That follows on, although quite a big chunk comparatively fully automated there.
Yeah, it is pretty much entirely in line with the wider survey, which is quite interesting. So yeah, 56% I think in the wider survey we're showing as having some form of partially or fully automated. So I think one of the key things is that there appears to be lots of people who have an intent to do it, but the movement year on year for the people that have done it is relatively small. So we see a great deal of intent to do it, but actually not huge jumps in the number that have actually taken the plunge and done it and moved from that partially automated towards the more fully automated position.
Yeah, Bobby, what are you finding with your clients and the people that you're talking to?
Yeah, no, I think for the poll question, right? I think that the numbers do align with what we're seeing here at SAP Concur. Just talking to customers and really talking about how they're moving to some of these new solutions to help automate I think the conversation's growing within all different kinds of businesses. You know, what are ways we can kind of reduce those manual tasks and you know, speed up some of these processes that, you know, in the past have taken a little bit more time than I think people would like. But I think it's, you know, you're seeing more and more companies move to solutions that have some sort of automation inside of them.
Now, you say there's some sort of automation, Bobby. What, in your two views, counts as automation? I mean, what are we looking at? What's the most basic thing? Bobby, maybe you'd like to kick us off on that one and
Yeah.
get round to what's fully automated.
Yeah, you know, I really think, you know, automation refers to almost any kind of technology that will help, you know, streamline and simplify these various manual tasks or processes that, you know, companies have to do every single day, whether that's data entry, invoice processing, or even payment processing. You know, I think some examples of the automation in accounts payable might be some technology like OCR or optical character recognition. That's one piece of technology we have used and continue to use. And, you know, for SAP Concur, we do have some proprietary technology called Textractor, which operates a little differently than OCR in the sense that it's a pixel-based capture tool. So, you know, I think these kind of tools and automation systems are part of that.
Rod, what do you consider partially or fully automated?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it? And I think it differs by whoever you ask. I mean, it's interesting. There are things in the report that kind of look like kind of contradictions, which I think back up the fact that there's a different perspective from different organisations. So, you know, we've already determined that sort of 56% of people are already partially automated, but then further on in the survey, 82% of people still say they manually key invoices in. So there's an interesting sort of like dichotomy there between the two, because you'd expect that to be a much lower number. So I think clearly the view of partially automated, which I think in my mind would include, as Bobby says, at least some form of automation of invoice processing as part of the AP process, that's perhaps not perceived by the people who are answering it as being partially automated. And I think a lot of people would start on the automation journey within expenses. That seems to be the one that tends to be the one that's kind of, you know, you can get your arms around it, you can pick it off, and it's fairly self-contained. So, you know, you can automate that, and that would probably put them into the partially automated group. I mean, in terms of fully automated, that's an interesting question, because that kind of changes almost every year as the technology gets better. So, you know, the idea of that, you know, what is AP and end to end? You know, do you include the procurement function at the front end of it as part of that, and do you have it essentially touchless, you know, all the way through? So you've got automatic, electronic invoices coming through. They're matched automatically using OCR technology and input to the system, matched to the invoices. Invoices get billed automatically with the banks to get it paid, and it's fairly touchless from end to end. Now that, I suppose, in my mind, is kind of the end-to-end automation, fully automated process. How many people have got that or likely to get there? That's probably a more difficult question. I think another interesting thing in terms of the way the technology moves as well is that perhaps in the past, people have looked towards one supplier to kind of do that whole automation piece end to end, and then find that it doesn't kind of fit the bill. And increasingly, there are many players in the market now, and some of them specialize in particular pieces. So, and they're much more able to be integrated. So you can mix and match in some degree, depending on your personal circumstances with your business, to get the, you know, more optimal solution.
Yeah, Bobby, I mean, talking about your personal circumstances, individual companies, is the some level of automation always useful, even with very small companies, or is it dependent on what people are actually doing in their AP departments?
Yeah, I think it kind of does depend, right? Whether it's the size of the company, the volume of invoices or payments that are being processed, you know, even the complexity of the AP process within the organization. And I think it really comes down to, you know, the overall business objectives. You know, how much do you want to automate? I do think we're probably a little far off from completely touchless, right? I still think, you do have to have some sort of human intervention, whether that's on, the strategy side or whatever it may be. But yeah, I definitely think that, it requires a little bit of art and science when, bringing in this automation into your business. And it's important to, have the difficult conversations, discuss your processes end to end. And I really do think it helps not only having, someone from procurement or maybe someone from the executive side in these conversations, but also someone who is actually in the processes, right? We're down in the trenches, helping solve those manual tasks and processes.
Rod, what's your, anything to add to that?
Not really, no. I think I agree with what Bobby's saying. Yeah.
Is there anywhere, I'd ask both of you, and it need only be a very quick answer, do you come across anybody that's working with no automation at all currently?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I mean, not interestingly, before I got to my current role, I had a number of sort of interviews with different places, and one of the places I went to look at working was entirely without automation. It was pretty much predominantly paper coming in and manual processes of people writing stuff, and there was very little automation and very little actual systems work. So suffice to say, it wasn't a great fit. So,
and it was of a size that could have used some, could have had.
It was a small company, but absolutely it could have benefited from it. It was a small company, but it had a very, very healthy order book, a very good profit margin, and there was many things that they could have done that would have significantly improved their position, even though it was a small company. Yeah.
So I guess we're talking, Bobby, about appropriate levels of automation. I mean, really looking at the business and what your processes are and what can help you. Okay, well, let's move on to some of the benefits. Now, 56% of AP teams still spending over 10 hours a week processing invoices. Well, I guess, again, depends on the number of invoices, depends on the number of people, but it still seemed quite a statistic. And that one that Rod spoke about, 82% still manually keying invoices into their ERP or accounting software. That sounds like a lot of not wasted effort, because it needs to be done, but effort that could be perhaps used elsewhere.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's interesting when you get to this on the subject of benefits, because part of the challenge to get any sort of AP automation off the ground is convincing the people that hold the budgets that this is a good thing to do. Every company that's in this situation will tend to have a finite amount of money they're going to invest in projects and systems, and so there's competing priorities and lots of people who want access to that funding, and you've got to make therefore the case for AP really compelling. What tends to happen traditionally is that people focus on cost savings within AP as you're managing cost, and therefore anything to do with accounts receivable tends to be, always seems to be much more sexy and much more interesting, because it's actually looking at the revenue and the potential figures, the headline figures almost always seem to come out higher. However, I think it's down to the imagination you can perceive as the benefits of it. And actually, one thing I noticed in the report, which I thought was really quite interesting, was the top 3 issues that are quoted by people of reason, caused by lack of automation: stress on the AP team, damage to vendor relationships, and delay to goods and services. And then the top 3 reasons for automating were to speed up the process, visibility of invoices, and to improve controls and risks. So on the face of it, there's no direct correlation between those 2 things. So the issues are, the real big issues are actually damaging the relationship with vendors and delaying your goods and services, which is all about your supply chain. And yet the perceived reasons for automating are all kind of process related within AP. Well, actually, what the people doing the business cases should be looking at, thinking, well, actually, it's not just about saving a few hours here and there of processing and maybe saving 1 FTE. That's not where the benefit is. The benefit is protecting your supply chain. And what's the impact if you don't? What's the cost of continually churning over vendors? What's the cost of having delays to your goods and services so you can't sell your own product? That's the actual benefit. And when you start looking at it that way, that becomes a much more significant number that then backs up the need to do the automation for AP.
Bobby, what are you coming across?
I completely agree with Rod here. I think one, good example is just the way that automation can help reduce, fraud and risk during this entire process, right? Whether that's, less human interaction or, the ability to have those improved audit trails. I think that's extremely important. The other part is, making sure your employees are happy, right? Instead of being bogged down in, copying and pasting invoices or, manually entering in invoices into Excel, they can really focus on some of these other strategic objectives in the business. And that not can just help their well-being, but also help, their career growth in general. So I think it is an important way to kind of stabilize your business, reduce risk, but also help your employees grow within your business.
And employers that you're coming across, do they take that on board, that you make your staff happier, you can use them better? I mean, at the moment in various areas, it's quite hard to recruit, isn't it? So you want to hang on to the people you've got, especially the good people.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly, Sue. And I think that's one of the key things about, automation as well, right? Is, it takes years to really get a good sense of some of these invoices that come in and understanding the business as a whole, right? So if you do have some unnecessary churn in your employees, or, maybe you're just having difficulty hiring, the automation can help solve those gaps, and kind of help reduce those fraudulent invoices that may come up, and make those roles a little more attractive for employees coming in. I really don't think there's too many people now that just want to be sitting there manually keying things in.
Sure. Before we get on to try and make some kind of roadmap to getting along to automation, one of you talked about trying to convince the people who hold the purse strings to let the company get involved in that. Is one of the fears that they're embarking on some kind of behemoth, that once they say, yes, I'll go down the road of some automation, that it's going to be such a massive project that it's going to, take more and more money? What would you say to that?
Yeah, I think it's just important to discuss these processes with the people that are in those AP roles, right? I just think having those conversations, bringing them into the meetings, I think, just start early, ask those difficult questions, be as transparent as you can with your processes. And, like I said earlier, right, it is a balance between art and science. Not every company's processes are going to be the same. Some solutions just won't work for some businesses as well. So you want to make sure that, the person that is in the role doing the work can actually talk about those processes in detail with, whoever that consultant might be on the vendor side.
Rod,
before we move on to that roadmap step, what excuses have you heard for not spending the money?
Yeah, I think it is about, I think as much as anything else, it's the art of storytelling, actually, because the people that are, making decisions about where the investment spend is going to go are not necessarily that close to these processes at all. So you've got to try and talk about it in language that they're going to understand and what's in it for them. They're going to be interested in what the return is. What's the compelling reason for doing this? What happens if I don't do this? As opposed to spending more money on, credit control, whatever else you might be looking at doing. And I think as well, as soon as you start getting into things like, terminology like artificial intelligence and so forth widely gets used and is very not widely understood. You've got to make sure that you're pitching it in language that people will understand.
Okay.
And so intelligent automation, I think, is a much better terminology than artificial intelligence, which has a whole sort of different set of connotations and arguably, doesn't exist, but that's a completely different.
Well, we'll go there in a moment.
Yeah.
We'll go there in a moment. But first of all, let's talk about that roadmap to automation. Bobby,
Yeah.
you mentioned the difficult questions. What's the most difficult question when you're starting out?
Oh man, most difficult question.
Well, some of the
That's a good
difficult
one.
questions.
Yeah, I think one of the most difficult questions is, figuring out which processes to automate, right? I think a lot of people should start with maybe some more of the simple processes. That way you can get your feet wet, learn the software, help enable your employees as well. I think sometimes the pace of adoption kind of outperforms the actual employees' knowledge of the technology that's being implemented. And that can lead to some resistance in the staff. And sometimes it's not exactly a pleasant experience for them. So I think that will help the whole entire process. Really just starting with those small processes, getting your feet wet, and then moving on to those bigger projects. Yeah.
Would you agree, Rod? Look at your
Yeah.
processes, identify.
Definitely. I think starting small is always a good idea, because you at least prove the concept. And then, once you've proved the concept and can demonstrably say, yes, we've achieved X, Y, and Z, you're much more likely to get a better audience next time you go forward for the next stage. So with that question, but I think the other thing that's probably worth pointing out as well, before you embark on any form of automation from a roadmap perspective, for me, the single most important first thing you do is actually understand your processes. It sounds like a really sort of self-evident, stupid thing to say, but so few people genuinely do. If you go into any company and say to them, right, show me your process maps for how your AP works end to end, warts and all, a lot of them won't have it. And it's in people's heads, and it might be written down somewhere in one place and a bit over there and a bit over here, and that person leaves the business and they're taking the knowledge with them, and that sort of stuff is very, very common. But until you understand your processes and genuinely understand where the pinch points are and what you're trying to achieve and what you'll get from it, then you're basically going in blind. And any technology, no matter how good it is not going to actually solve the problem. So start with the process is where I'd always begin.
Blanca, it's great that you could join us. We're talking about that roadmap to automation. What would be your top tips for people and AP departments to look at before they perhaps embark on it?
Yes, no, I think for me, it's definitely knowing what your processes are and being familiar with it. I think a lot of people, when they talk about automation, they think that, once it's implemented, it's going to solve all of their problems. And that's definitely not the case, right? Like, I think that if you have inherent problems within your processes, if anything, that would just be kind of like a lot more obvious when automation comes in. And so I think that kind of, digging deeper into what those problems are and addressing them is a very important thing in terms of that roadmap to automation.
Okay. And would you say that there's sort of an optimum speed to adopt automation? How do you know if you're doing it right, if your first step has been successful?
I think that, in terms of conversations, definitely that engagement. You have to have that initial sign off on that a proposal. Somebody is going to have to commit to that budget. So I think that socializing it to like your stakeholders from the top down essentially is very important. And once you kind of you can gauge that I've got them on the table, they're talking about it, then that you've had a little bit of success. Especially I've been involved in companies that have a very kind of traditional way of thinking, and switching them from kind of this side over into the greener side is definitely a lot of the challenge sometimes. Especially I came from a public health sector, and especially competing with different different initiatives, during the times of COVID, all of the investments are going into COVID. So trying to compete with those priorities is a challenge. But if you have the right people on the table, and if you can gauge that you have their buy-in, then I think that's a fair bit of success.
Thanks very much. Bobby, what are the clues that when you've taken that step, you're getting it right?
Oh man. Clues if you're getting it right. Oh,
What should you be looking out
I
for?
think having that buy-in, right? Having a champion at the top who's going to help push it down. I think that is just one of the best things to have. I do think that's an important step to, just make sure the whole project goes forward. And that way your employees don't have that resistance, right? Sometimes they can think, they hear automation and they think, oh my gosh, there goes my job, right? That's, never the case. They're still going to be there, controlling the processes, making sure that everything's running fine. So.
Okay, so would you agree with that, Rod, that it's going well if people have got buy-in and dare we say, enjoy using it?
Yeah, I think so, and I think there's a couple of things that also you can do. I mean, some of it comes down to back to the business case, for doing the change in the first place. And this is sort of with my accountant head on, is that if you've done the business case right and you've got your KPIs properly identified, you know what success looks like. Right? That's again, I've seen probably hundreds of business cases over the years. Some have been fantastic and some have been dreadful. And the fantastic ones always have very, very clear vision of what they're trying to achieve and proper measurable targets that you can measure to show what you've achieved. That's really important right from the start, because as long as because that tells you what success looks like. Right? And if you can measure that as you go through, then it's self-evident. You can demonstrate it straight away. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. There you go. We've achieved it. And that then starts to take on the momentum that people can see it. I mean, Bobby's absolutely right. You need to take your people along with you. And that's, so the communication side of this really genuinely shouldn't be underestimated. The whole change management aspect of this, you've got to take the people along with you, and you've got to be honest. And so the communications have got to be genuine. They've got to be honest, and they need to be, frank and timely. Because some people, will not necessarily go along with wanting to do it. But as long as you're honest with them about what it's going to look like afterwards, and for most people, I mean, for example, I think 90% of people in the survey said they believed it would free staff up for more important tasks. Now that for most people would be a really big incentive. You're not going to be there keying in invoices until you go dizzy. You're going to be able to do these really now much more interesting and exciting things. A small number of people won't go through it, but at least they know that from the start. So sell it to the right people with the right language.
Okay, well, we've just got a few more minutes left, and we've touched on it. AI. Now, you put the letters round the other way, Rod, called that intelligent automation, or thought that might be a better way of looking at it. And I think from the survey, when people were identifying it, 18% said they used it, 62% said they didn't, and 20% said they weren't sure. So does that just show that we don't really know what to class as AI, IA, whatever?
I think so, absolutely. I spent about 5 years working within robotic process automation in my previous role, and the terminology, I think a lot of people find hugely confusing about what it actually is. And AI is one of those terms that's just out in the ether, and it has all sorts of connotations about sentient beings taking over the world and all the rest of it. When you're talking about something like AP, it's intelligent automation. What it is, it's a much more sophisticated set of algorithms that can learn. Okay, it doesn't think. Right? It's not going to think for you, make decisions for you, but it will learn from. So the bigger the data set you build up, it will learn from previous examples. So your hit rate of actually getting, a higher level of accuracy first time through will increase as time goes on. And that's really all you're talking about in the main with AI. And then there are some really sophisticated tools to take this information and perform some really proper analysis. As long as your data is right, your analysis ability then becomes much more sophisticated and powerful. And I think if people understand that's what you're talking about, it becomes much less scary.
Okay, so Blanca, is that what you recognize that you're talking about when you talk about AI, if indeed you do? What's your view?
Yes, no, I totally agree. I mean, I've been a part of two previous automation implementation. This is my third time at it now. And, you know, like over time, the technology has changed, right? Like, whereas before we're looking at OCRs and, but now it's completely changed. And I agree with Rod that in terms of the bigger data set, the better learning this machine is going to have.
And Bobby, from your perspective, I guess you have some examples, you've come across it. What do you consider AI and who's using it?
Yeah, so, you know, I think it's a tough term right now to kind of pinpoint, but, you know, I think it's really any kind of ability of machines or software, right, to kind of help simulate that human element or that human intelligence, whether that's recognizing patterns in these large data sets, you know, understanding, you know, the language in these invoices and the expenses, and what it really does. And I think Rod and Blanca, they did a great job explaining was, you know, it helps learn from those previous experiences. So it does help to have, you know, a large data set, or, you know, help feed that machine learning or that that artificial intelligence so it can learn and you know.
Yeah, well, we might be getting ahead of ourselves because we haven't quite established what we think AI is in a way, but a little bit of crystal ball gazing now. How are things changing? I mean, Blanca just mentioned that, you know, in 3 projects lifespans, she's seen the changes. So what is changing now and what will change next? And you'll be glad to know we've only got a couple of minutes to talk about this. So Bobby, do you want to kick off with that?
Yeah, I think from, you know, from an SAP Concur side, you've seen, especially on the machine learning side, with our Textractor solution, you know, it operates a lot differently than this OCR technology, which, you know, has been out for quite a while. With Textractor, it does, you know, become a lot more efficient, and it is a lot more you know, a lot more accurate, excuse me, when picking up those invoices. So, you know, I think those are a couple ways that we've implemented some of this automation inside. But honestly, I think, you know, kind of sky's the limit with automation. I think it will help, you know, really reduce some of these complex processes and, you know, help reduce those manual efforts.
Thank you. Blanca, with your experience, any changes that you'd like to pinpoint particularly?
Yeah, it's hard to say, like, but definitely there is, like, at this stage, you can't even really foresee sort of like, you know, what things it can do, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, 10 years ago when we embarked in this technology, we didn't think that it can, you know, pick up you know, like these fields and just simulate what humans can do. I think that right now what we see is the machine only can be as good as the quality of the data you're capturing. But what I'd like to see in the future is for that to actually make those auto corrections, right? Like, say, for example, right now it's picking up an S as a 5, and it's still not able to make that correction. So even small things like that, I'd like it to be able to be able to do those auto corrections.
Great, thanks very much. Rod, big changes you've seen, big changes you think we might see. What's your view?
In terms of what I've seen, if I go back sort of 5 years when I was sort of in the midst of doing robotic process automation, which at the time was relatively new and a new sort of, you know, new technology, that is fantastic at rules-based work. You know, that's what a standard robot, that's what it does. You set the rules and it will do it quicker than a person and more accurate 24/7. That's basically what it's for. What it was really, really poor at was things like free text boxes. If you've got a free text box on an invoice and other documents, couldn't cope with it because it could be different every time. And we had to employ data scientists and, you know, very expensive consultants to help us to build the algorithms that would sort of try and prove whether or not you could read these things, or reading emails, for example, when they come in. Emails come in into a mailbox, and it takes a person to determine, you know, where they need to be routed to. And we proved it, but it cost a lot of money. We never fully got into full production with it. That sort of technology now is pretty much free. Right, 5 years on, it's pretty much free. It's very easy. It's configurable by, you know, on your own, pretty much. As long as you've got sort of decent, you know, Excel and SQL experience, you can generally configure this stuff. So it's becoming much more accessible all the time and much more powerful. I think for me, the trick is that the exponential growth in the power of the software at the moment isn't matched by the capability and the knowledge of the people to actually use it. And I think that's probably the area where we need to understand it. You know, to get the best out of this stuff, we've got to start training our people better in how to actually manage the software and manage the tools. And I think that's probably because it can go ahead as far as as fast as you like, but unless you've got your team's able to use it, you're never going to get the best out of it.
So with taking the baby steps and the spare time that releases, people can concentrate on learning new skills and what they need.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, let's take people away from being taught how to sort of key an invoice into a system to actually understanding how to use the data and do something useful with it.
Great, thank you. Thank you to all three of you, our panel of experts, Blanca McGrory, Rod Chadwick and Bobby Hodges from SAP Concur. Thanks a lot. For more information on membership and courses, please head over to the IFOL website. And this webinar will be available on demand on the IFOL website from tomorrow. So please do share it with any colleagues or friends who you feel may be interested. We'll send a link to top suggestions and course best practice guide. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.